Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Emily Butler. I work at AMP Capital, and I'll be your host for this session of Amplify. I'd like to warmly welcome all our visitors to AMP board and staff, members of the media, and those of you streaming in via our live cast from around the world. Our grand finale for Amplify Sydney 2017 brings us to the edge of wonder. Taking us there is Dan Barry, one of the only 550 people in the world to have seen our tiny blue planet from space. Not only is Dan a NASA astronaut and veteran of 3 space flights and 4 spacewalks, he is also one of Princeton's 100 top notable alumni of the 20th century, a Doctor of Medicine and Electrical Engineering. He survived for 2 weeks as a castaway on Survivor Panama, has battled bots on BattleBots, and started 2 robotics companies, Denbar Robotics and Fellow Robots. He's also a founding faculty member at Singularity University. So please join me in welcoming Dan to the stage for the Edge of Wonder.
Thank you, Emily. Well, I'm excited to be here. Just 2 days ago, my wife and I came to Sydney and completed my 7th continent. So I was very happy to finally check that box. And we've had a great time seeing some of your city, even though it was a bit wet today. So tonight, I'm going to talk about spaceflight, and I'm going to talk about robotics and artificial intelligence and a lot of those types of subjects. But the overlying theme of the talk is actually trust, and how you decide to trust a machine is something that is looming on our future. I mean, trust is such a human thing. It's so culturally dependent. You know, it's okay to be a little late in Italy. It's not in Japan. If you're going to do business in Russia, you might want to be drinking buddies first. Everybody, I think, universally increases trust with a meal. You share some food. So it's such a culturally dependent thing, and yet right on the horizon now we have these machines coming up who are going to require us to make decisions about whether or not to trust them. And in the financial industry, this machine gives you advice, and it doesn't tell you why it's giving you that advice because it's probably a deep learning AI, and then you have to make the decision whether or not to trust it, to take that advice, because if it's bad, it's on you, not on the machine. So how do you make those decisions? How do you come to that conclusion? How do you establish trust, first of all, among human beings, but then second, to the machine? And in the end, we're going to trust these machines with our lives, because autonomous cars are just around the corner. And you think about it, those machines will be making life and death decisions for you. And not just about whether or not to brake and to stop because the car in front of you is stopping, but if you're going around a cliff and suddenly a school bus shows up on a one-way road, probably the right thing for society is to toss you off the cliff. And your car will probably be programmed to do that. So you might choose not to buy that particular model. And what I would suggest to you is that every model will be programmed like that, but the clever people will just hack their car a little bit so that at the appropriate time it looks like a school bus to all the other cars, right? Or an ambulance or a police car. So there's going to be big business in spoofing your car. So along those lines, I wanted to start with an example of where I think we are right on the cusp today of making the choice between trusting a human being versus trusting a machine. And so let's roll that first one. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you through Flight 1549, which is a flight that took off out of New York, LaGuardia, ended up in the Hudson River. Everybody survives. Everybody actually walks away from this, and it's brilliant. We're going to go through the process that the pilots were thinking, listen to what they're doing, and explain. So you can see the top dial there, that's altitude. And the bottom dial is airspeed. You can see the first officer and the captain talking to each other there on the bottom. And right now, the first officer is flying. So the captain is giving them the indicators, 80, telling them what the airspeed is, helping them out in terms of understanding exactly when to rotate. So you see their speeds coming up. And by the way, this is a crystal clear, beautiful day in New York. So both of these pilots have thousands of hours doing this. This is a walk in the park for them. Just another day at the office. Can we bring that up a little bit? Bring the sound up so we can hear it. So they're at 500 feet, clean, clear takeoff.
700, landing 5,000.
Going to 5,000 feet. And we'll hear air traffic control come in and start to talk to them.
15.9, departure to contact on maintain 15,000.
Maintain 15,000, cactus 1549.
So they're cleared to 15,000 feet. You can see they're at about 1,500 feet right now. Their airspeeds come up. If you're in the back, you see the slats and things coming up. And they're finishing up their takeoff, after takeoff checklist.
5,000, turning your right, 150.
Turning 2765, maintain 10,000.
So after takeoff checklist is complete now, and you're coming up on 3,000 feet, and boom, birds. So, oh yeah, uh-oh, both of them rolling back. So now you got both engines that are not producing thrust. You can see you're about 3,100 feet right now. Starting the APU, my aircraft. So the captain's now flying, so he's taken over the plane. And they're going to go through this quick reference handbook, which is a thing that just tells you what you can do in an emergency.
This is Cactus 1539, hit birds to lost thrust on both engines, returning back towards LaGuardia.
Okay, you need to return to LaGuardia. Turn left heading up 220.
220.
So he's going back to LaGuardia. And by the way, I wouldn't be quite that calm.
Departure's got emergency returning.
So he's at 2,500 feet. Look at that dial.
Bird strike, he lost all engine. He lost the thrust in the engines. He's returning immediately.
Cactus 1529, which engines?
He lost thrust in both engines, he said.
Got it.
So he's at 2,000 feet. Watch that dial.
We can get it for you. Do you want to try to land 1013?
We may end up in the Hudson.
So now he's decided to go to the Hudson. Watch the two of them try to get these engines relit. He's going through this checklist. 1,500 feet. So he's flying the plane, going through this checklist, getting ready to talk to the people in the back, dealing with air traffic control. He thinks one engine's coming up, so they're getting some options.
It's going to be left traffic to runway 31.
Sending the distress message, unable. He's not talking a lot to them. And he's doing all of this, and at the same time, he looks out the window, and he sees an airport over to the right. So you imagine how cool this guy is.
Runway 4 is available if you want to make left traffic to runway 4.
I'm not sure we make any runway. Once over to our right, anything in New Jersey, maybe Teterboro.
Okay, yeah, off your right side is Teterboro Airport.
This is serious multitasking.
Do you want to try to go to Teterboro?
Yes.
1,200 feet. They're going to set him up to go to Teterboro. They're still trying to get the engines lit.
Emergency inbound.
Hey, guys.
Cactus 1529 over the George Washington Bridge wants to go to the airport right now.
This is the captain, brace for impact.
You need assistance?
They're at 1,000 feet. If you hear that, do it.
Runway 1.
Runway 1, that's good.
Cactus 1529, turn right 280, you can land runway 1 at Teterboro.
We can't do it.
Okay, which runway would you like at Teterboro?
We're going to be in the Hudson.
We're going to be in the Hudson, so that's it. He's done talking to them. They can't help him anymore. But that was an important thing to say because now he knows the SAR, the search and rescue folks, will be there for him when he needs them to be there. So they're going to continue to light these engines. But look at that. They're at 400 feet, and look at that speed. If they hit the water at that speed, that aircraft will just explode. He's way too fast. So he has to slow down, and he knows that.
Radar contact is lost. You also got Newark Airport up at 2 o'clock in about 7 miles.
He won't even answer them because they can't help him anymore. Watch him go from 200 feet. He's climbing. Why is he climbing? Because he's got to bleed off that airspeed. You can't let it drop below about 126 because then the plane will stall and drop out of the sky.
I think he said he's going in the Hudson.
Yep.
Cactus 1529, you saw him?
Watch that speed. He's got to land as slow as he can, but above 126.
Cactus 1529.
Got any ideas? That's a brilliant question. Okay, because maybe he does. So see him climb, and now he's coming back down. Watch that airspeed. It's right around 130 or so right now. And they brace at this point inside the cockpit, and he comes on down. We're going to brace, and he's going to hit that water at about 128. It's perfect. It's perfect. He not only hits the water at 128, he hits the water directly across from the ferries. So he knows that they can come pick him up. It's brilliant, right? And everybody walks away. Everybody survives. So, yeah. So they get back, and immediately the question, of course, is, Well, he's a hero. Everybody's alive. But then they run the autopilots and they say, well, you know what? This thing could have made it back to LaGuardia. What kind of fool put it in the Hudson? He's no hero. He's a goat. But the fact is that even if you have a 95% chance of getting back to LaGuardia, first of all, you don't know the state of the aircraft is going to stay the way it is right now, right? So as engines seize up instead of spinning, suddenly you have all this extra drag. You won't make it, even if you could have made it when you started. And even if you have a 95% chance of getting there, you don't do it. Because if you don't make it, everybody on board dies and a lot of people on the ground die. That thing is full of fuel. So you have a responsibility not just to yourself and the people on board, but the people on the ground. So he makes a pretty quick decision that the Hudson's the right place to be, and of course that's the right decision. And it's borne out by the skill of being able to put this thing down. So that's Captain Sully. And I think that, you know, the question becomes, would you trust the machine to make the decision or the man? And in this case, I'm going with Sully, right? The problem is, you don't always get Captain Sully, right? And I could show you a dozen other scenarios where if the crew had just left the aircraft alone, everything would have been fine. But instead, they crashed. So, you know, what do? You go into the plane, look in the cockpit, see what he looks like, you know? It's a tough decision. And in fact, there's even a cultural aspect of this decision. If you fly an Airbus, that thing really limits what the pilots can do. You cannot stall an Airbus. If you put an input in to pull the nose up at low speed, the computer says, that's a bad idea, and it won't let you do it. But if you do the same thing in a Boeing aircraft, it will. So Boeing aircraft design philosophy is the crew always is right. And Airbus design philosophy is the crew's usually right, but we're not going to listen to them all the time. And those two things have led to pluses and minuses. So it's an interesting kind of dichotomy in the way, a whole philosophy of how planes are built. I think this is just such a good example because I think the equation is going to change. In 5 or 10 years, I'm going to get a lot more confident in the machine. And the other thing is that as pilots, as the machines get better and better, the pilots have fewer and fewer opportunities to intervene. They become less experienced at intervening. So now you have people who haven't maybe seen a bank angle of over 60 degrees in 20 years. And that's probably not somebody you want in control of the aircraft. In the end, if you can get Sully, take it. If you can't get Sully, I don't know. So, yeah, so trust in the machine. What I want to show next is a series of robots where we're going to go from robots I think you can pretty easily trust and just get the job done and are pretty safe to be around, to ones that I'm not so sure that we necessarily want, or at least it's an argument about how much trust you want to put them in. So let's run that second one. This is a bricklayer, and you know, it's pretty consistent. It's not too dangerous. In fact, you could consider this a friendly robot if you're not a bricklayer. But it's sensing its environment. It's doing the exact same thing every time. There's not much smarts inside of that thing. And then this is a bigger scale example of almost the exact same thing. I mean, this is manufacturing a car. These machines will kill you, though. They're stupid. They do the same thing every single time. And if you get in their way, they'll kill you. So these things are dangerous. But if you stay out of their way, they're not going to take over the world. They're never leaving that factory. So they're probably okay. On the other hand, now here you have one that maybe you bring into your house, which is another level. You know, do you want your pet to be also the one that cleans up after you? I'm not so sure, but this is actually a state-of-the-art machine because the process of sensing these objects and then being able to pick up a glass with enough force for it to not slip, and yet pick up a can with enough force not to crush it is hard. And yet, they're not so perfect, right? So a banana peel can get in the way. But like any good creature, these guys can get themselves back upright and be on their way, and this time avoid the banana peels. And so, but this has the potential to be dangerous. I mean, would you bring that into your home? Would you trust it, at night? And I would say this is one. That one I probably would. This one I probably wouldn't. So this is Handle. This could be your bodyguard. Right? You could walk down dark streets in New York City with $20 bills hanging out of your pocket, and if Handle's with you, you're probably going to be okay. He can get downstairs pretty well. He doesn't do upstairs so great. So you kind of got to go one way with him. But this is the sort of machine and it's able to do this all autonomously. There's nobody controlling that motion. On the other hand, there's other machines that maybe you don't want to be in the dark alley. And they start to get friends with each other. That's particularly interesting. Then, of course, we come to drones. I mean, we've all heard about drones. This was my first introduction to learning to fly a drone. This was in Rio de Janeiro with my friend Gabriel. He's teaching me how to fly. So we're flying this thing remotely with virtual reality goggles on. And this is the scene you're seeing, even though you're sitting 2 miles away. So you can go, and this thing only costs about $200. So even if you crash it, it's not the end of the world. And Gabriel is so good at it, he can fly right up and catch it out of the air. Boom. These things are a security nightmare, right? They have no radar signature. You can turn off the engine once you get to altitude, so they have no acoustic signature. You paint them blue on the bottom, so they have no visual signature. These things make borders transparent. It's a nightmare. And furthermore, even if someone catches your drone, you just let it go. It's a couple $100, and they never know where it came from or who was flying it. There's no accountability. Then the next level of trust, of course, is autonomous vehicles. I talked about the car, and this is the aircraft. Now, you're not a pilot in this plane. This is get in, set up the environment the way you want, pull up Google Maps, touch where you want to go, and then it flies you there. And now, this is actually a little bit cheating because this thing doesn't really exist commercially yet. But so it can sort of do this in a very controlled environment, but it's not very far away. I mean, it's getting to be around the corner. But that is, to a certain degree, fake. But it's coming. The next level of trust is when you let robots inside your body. And the original robotics in medicine were just basically tools, where you would set up the tool to allow a surgeon to drive a pin to precisely the right spot. And basically guide tools is what they were. But now, the state-of-the-art medicine, the surgeon's not even at the operating table anymore. Kind of the next level is intuitive surgical Da Vinci, where the surgeon is off in the corner, maybe even not even in the same country. And the tools are inside you, and they operate them remotely. Now that can be great in the sense of if he's had too much coffee this morning, he's got a tremor, you can just smooth that out. You can gear it down 100 to 1. Right? On the other hand, if you get the Microsoft blue screen of death, that could be a bad day. So, again, do you trust these things to do what they'll do? And right now you have a surgeon controlling it, but the obvious next step is that it's autonomous. And then, of course, the next level is you let them put a robot in your brain. And so you have a brain implant and then control robotics through brain activity.
I'm already very interested.
And finally, the robots start to become us.
And the environment. I feel like I can be a good partner to humans in these areas, an ambassador who helps humans to smoothly integrate and make the most of all the new technological tools and possibilities that are available now. It's a good opportunity for me to learn a lot about people.
So they become us, right? You have to decide, at what level do you want these things to exist? At what level are you willing to trust them? And I hear, as I go around the world giving talks like this, I hear a lot of gloom and doom, like, the robots are going to take all the jobs. The robots are going to, replace humanity. And I think that's completely wrong, actually. I think that the robots are going to take the jobs that are below human dignity to do. There should not be anybody that wastes their lives for 40 years digging ditches. That is below human dignity to do. For that matter, even doing discovery in a law office for 20 years. It's brutal. We shouldn't waste a human mind doing repetitive, detailed kind of things that AI can be so good at. And I can give you some examples. I'm an advisor to a company called Sensentia. And what Sensentia has done is developed an AI that reads through health insurance policies. And right now, if you call your health insurer and ask, am I covered for this particular condition? This is in the United States. Am I covered for this condition? You get the correct answer about 90% of the time. That means 10% of the time you get the wrong answer. So Sensentia's AI is able to get it right about 85, 87% of the time, which is not as good as the humans. But they the mistakes that the AI make are fundamentally different than the mistakes the humans make. So when you combine the two, when you have the human with access to the AI, you get about 97% accuracy. And why is that? Why are they complementary rather than competitive? And the answer is because the AIs never miss the word no. They get they dig in and they get every detail right. But they are completely oblivious to the big picture. And the humans understand when a person's in an emergency situation or where there's some special circumstance that makes this particular rule not apply today, or simply understands that we need to push this up to another level because there's some overlying issue that's beyond the written rules of the policy. So when you combine human and AI, you get a better result than from either one. And I started to look at the financial industry, knowing that I was coming to give this talk. I thought, what is the AI in law and in finance? There's actually a peer-reviewed journal, Law and Artificial Intelligence. So people are looking at this really carefully, and yet it's way behind. If you compare where AI is in, say, robotics, compared to where AI is in the financial industry, it's like the financial industry is living in 1995. It's terrible. And so I wonder, how can that be? Because I got to say, the things that you are often concerned with in terms of things like regulatory policy and long, detailed, complicated procedures are really good for AI. It's the sort of thing it should be doing great at. So why is it so far behind? And I think I know why. I want to introduce a little bit of basis, and then I'm going to say what I think. And I'd be interested in your feedback, anybody that is dealing with those sorts of things. When I have a very small robotics company. There's a few of us that are doing this company. And so there's no way that we can develop on our own state-of-the-art robotic software. So how do you exist? The way we exist is we started the platform with open source software, absolutely free, a common basis that people all over the world use. And when I get stuck on a problem, I post it. And I say, I'm stuck on this bug. I really need this fixed. Help me. And then I go to sleep. And the next morning, the answer's there for free. Well, why would that be? Why would somebody give me their work? And the reason they do that is because my reputation in that community is very high. And it's very high because I have answered a lot of questions for people. You say, well, that's just a trade-off. You do their work, they do your work. It's a wash. It's not. And the reason it's not is because there's a small area of software that I know really, really well. And if you ask me a question about that, I can answer it in 5 minutes. I can write you a whole piece of code in 10 minutes that you could go off and use. But there's other areas I know almost nothing about. And so I will ask a question and ask for code in those areas. And there's some other guy around the world who's in the opposite boat. He's an expert in that area. What would take me 2 weeks, he can knock off in 10 minutes. And then there's another guy somewhere that needs my expertise. And so basically you have millions of people, and everybody can work on the thing they're really good at and give that away in exchange for receiving software that they're not good at. So it's like having a 1 million-person development team where everybody's just working on the area that they are really, really good at. But where's the business model in that, right? I mean, we're all giving everything away for free. That's not going to work. And of course, if I'm always asking and never giving back, my reputation goes down and people will stop answering my questions. So reputation is currency in this kind of community. And you build it by answering questions accurately. But then how do you turn that into a product? Well, the fact is, the software in our robots you can have. It's free. Just go get it and download it. But then I would ask you, what are you going to do with it? Right? You don't know what to do with it because you don't build our robots, right? You don't operate the things that we do. So we have a lot of expertise and experience in taking that software, implementing it in a particular environment, say a retail environment or whatever, and creating something that is useful. So the fact that you've given away the software turns out to be no impact on your bottom line. And in fact, it means that when there are bugs that come up, your little 50-person team doesn't have to answer those things because you can just post them and get your million-person team to fix it for you. And if you get enough people going on, you don't even have to intervene with that. You set up bulletin boards and people just answer each other. And you step back from the whole customer service thing entirely. Just let the community take care of it for you. It's an incredibly productive way to get things done. So I look at the financial state of the art, and there is none. You say, why is that? It's because nobody shares. Every company has, it seems like, there must be 50 teams with different companies around the world all trying to build their own little walled garden of AI software with a team of, I don't know, 10 people, 50 people, whatever. You don't have a team of 1 million people. Right? And everybody is reinventing the wheel. So all these individual projects are going on, all basically doing the exact same thing and not getting very far because the investment you'd have to make to have the kind of expertise that you're going to compete with when you're going against somebody like our company in robotics, you'd have to have 1 million people on your team. So my prediction would be that at some point somebody's going to wise up and they're going to create an open source platform, and at that point other people will get on top of it, and all these 50 little walled gardens are just going to disappear. There's even a guideline in software coding, Conway's Law from the 80s. It says software architecture mirrors the architecture of the organization it was developed in. So if you have a very closed wall thing, which it turns out I guess banks do, you aren't going to write code that you give away for free. So, and in the end, it's really a trust thing, right? Because sometimes the code that I get, I don't even understand. I can just put the inputs in and the outputs, I'll test it, I'll verify it, make sure it's right. But I don't even understand. I don't have time to understand it. So I trust that person because their reputation is high enough. I've never met them, I don't know them, but I see other people that have used their software. And after a while, of course, you do develop personal relationships. But the bottom line is I trust the community. And that's a big thing. So this whole concept of reputation as currency and trusting the community to develop things is something that has pushed AI and robotics really far. And I'll be interested to see how it works in the financial community. So having said that, I'm going to turn now to talking about true trust in a machine, where I trusted my life to a machine. And I have to say that my whole life, I wanted to fly in space. This was, far back as I can remember. And in first grade, no problem. First grade, everybody else in first grade wanted to be an astronaut too. And the adults were great too. They were like, yeah, go for it, kid. You'll be an astronaut. Sure you will. So, yeah, good. Around sixth grade, the numbers started to dwindle. And I would say only about half my sixth grade class wanted to be astronauts. Ninth, 10th grade, mostly it was just my small group of friends. And by the time I was a senior in high school, I was the only one left. Everybody else had wised up, gone off to do other things like professional sports or something. And this is what I'm going to do. So the day comes to see the guidance counselor, and she's going to tell me what I need to do to be an astronaut. I'm excited. I'm ready to hear this. So I go into the office, and this is an image I'll never forget. She's across the desk, and she's looking at the folders, and she just looks right at me. You want to be an astronaut? Yeah, tell me how to do that. And she said, well, I'm going to give you a little bit of truth. She said, the fact is you're not smart enough to be an astronaut. I said, what? I can study harder. I'll hit the library today. She said, well, you could do that, but you're not athletic enough to be an astronaut. Wow, okay, well, I'll go to the gym, right? She said, look, you're not even good looking enough to be an astronaut. So, wow, but what that taught me in my mind was that my dream was something that other people made fun of. That it was a joke to people. When I would say, I'm going to be an astronaut, they might not laugh to my face because they're too polite to do that, but inside they were not taking me seriously. Because what kind of flaky guy does that? So I didn't tell anybody about it. I was very embarrassed about this dream, but I was rock solid wanting to do it. And when I was 23 and met the minimum requirements, I applied to NASA, and I sent the whole thing out, and I spent days doing it, and I sent it in. And you send it in September, and you get it back, a letter back in April, and it's that thin envelope. You ever get that thin envelope in the mail? You know, we regret to inform you there were many qualified candidates, rejected. So that's okay. I'm young, and I'm just a graduate student. So the next year I send it in again, and of course, rejected. And that goes on for a number of years. Never heard a word, just a letter 9 months later. And you can imagine, by the time you finish all this school, and you're off being a professor at the University of Michigan, think about going to your boss today and saying, I'd like you to write me a letter of recommendation to be an astronaut. Yeah, that's what they do. They laugh. That's right. They laugh. And then when they finish laughing, they go, seriously? Yeah. So they write the letter. And then, of course, a year later, you got to go back and you remember that letter you wrote last year? Well, I need a better one because it didn't work out too well. And eventually, my boss, the chairman of our department, said, you know, you need to focus a little more on tenure and a little less in this astronaut business. And anyway, I think you're getting too old. I had visions of my guidance counselor. Too old. So I called the astronaut selection office. And there's a guy there, there's a manager of the office named Dwayne Ross. And he's a real Texan guy. And he's like, hello. I say, you know, I've been applying for a lot of years. And he said, well, who are you? Dan Barry. Oh, Dan, we know who you are. Okay, I think that's a good sign. So you're not immediately putting the thing in the circular file. And I said, you know, am I getting too old? And Dwayne goes, oh, no, you're not too old. You can keep applying. Okay. Of course, rejected, right? But 1 year, finally, I get an interview. And so I'm getting an interview. So you go down there, and I met people who were so passionate about this thing. So passionate. You have to understand, in 20 years, I had never met another person who wanted to fly in space, or at least anyone who admitted it. And now I was meeting people who'd done it, and was in an interview group of people who were competing with me to get to do it. And I went home and I told my wife, Sue, who's right here, I don't care if they offer me this job or if they offer me a job to sweep the floors. I'm going to go work with these people because they share my passion. And fast forward a few months, they announced the day they're going to say who gets in and who doesn't. And the deal is, if Dwayne calls you, you didn't get in. But if the chairman of the selection board calls you, you're in. So about a week before this announcement's due, we're going on vacation. So I called Dwayne. Oh, Dwayne, Dan Barry here, and you know, and he said, hey, Dan, I'm going to be in the Bahamas, nowhere near a phone. There were no cell phones then. Nowhere near a phone. There's no way you're going to be able to call me on, Monday. So it's like, well, that's too bad, Dan. I say, Dwayne. He goes, okay, tell you what, you go find a phone somewhere in the Bahamas, and you can call me at 11 o'clock in the morning on Monday morning. I said, Dwayne, I don't want to call you. Sorry, Dan, you got to call me. So, okay, Dwayne, I'm going to the bookstore this afternoon. I like history and biography, but maybe I should buy some astronomy. So all those subjects are good subjects, Dan. Hey, Dwayne, man, he would not move an inch, that guy. So the day comes, I'm in the Bahamas. I get 2 big fat rolls of Bahamian quarters, this little tiny, 2-hut town payphone with thatch around it and rusted everything. I hope this thing works. Feeding the quarters in, right? And finally it rings, and he's like, hello? I'm like, hey, Dan Barry here. He goes, hey, Dan, how's your vacation going? I'm like, come on, Dwayne, that depends on what you have to say. And he goes, well, there's someone else who wants to talk to you. Right? Yeah, okay. So I practically blew the lid off of that phone booth, got in. And you go there, and on the first day, the chief of the astronaut office said, selection's over, every one of you will fly in space, and we all did. 14 years of applying for this thing. 14 years. 1 interview, got in. And I found out, of course, later that there were people who'd done 4 or 5 interviews, and everybody was beating against the walls. If you gave up after 1 or 2 applications, that was a filter. They were just happy to not have you anymore. Let's run this next one. So this is a composite of 3 space flights, 4 spacewalks, and 2 trips to the International Space Station. This is a dream come true. This was my dream coming true. So here we are about 4 hours before my first launch. I'm ready to go. It was a bad weather night, so I'm talking about how we're going. I don't care. You can do whatever weather you want. This is the second launch, actually. So it was a dawn launch, which is kind of pretty to see. And I thought you might appreciate this one. So here we go. Solids for about 2 minutes, and then after about 2 minutes, the solids drop off, and the ride goes from shake and bake to smooth and easy. You ride another 6 minutes on the 3 main engines, and 8 minutes, 25,000 kilometers an hour. You're in orbit. You go around the Earth every 90 minutes. So let's see, Sydney to Los Angeles. That's about 15 minutes. If you're late, for work, I'm your guy. This is the real dream, going out. When you push your nose up against the window of the Space Shuttle, it's pretty small, and so the image is framed. But when you go outside, the visor is big enough so you can fill your whole field of view with the beauty of the Earth. My friends are driving me on the end of this robot arm. I can't ever show you a picture of the beauty of the Earth. The photos just don't do it justice. You have to see it with your eyes. Here we are actually encountering a little problem during a spacewalk. They almost always happen, and you just rely on training to get you through it. And of course, stupid space tricks. Stupid astronauts. That's me going up. And we get better and better. You'll see. We get better and better at this as we gain some experience. And finally, Rick Husband is like, my eyeballs are going to pop out here. So we did three-dimensional dancing. You can do point and counterpoint. If you get 2 beats to a song, you can do three-dimensional dancing. It's amazing. You feel like Superman. You push with your pinky finger, you fly like Superman. Fluids are interesting. I wanted to just show this as how 2 types of fruit juice float in the air. Cups don't work, right? You drink your juice just straight out of the air. And the physics of this are really interesting. So you can see how the surface tension just causes them to grab. And of course, this tasted terrible, but it's TV, so you got to pretend it tasted great. Oh yeah, right. Entry is as dynamic as launch, but it lasts about 45 minutes instead of 8 minutes. The very first thing that happens is these big balls of plasma fire shoot off the tail. I didn't even know that was going to happen. There's a few surprises. The crew leaves for the rookies. I was like, is that supposed to happen? Because I thought we were just going to get a big surprise. Yeah, that happens. And then the shuttle hits density shears in the atmosphere, and bam, the whole shuttle's shaking and the wings are flapping. Man, is that supposed to? Yeah, it happens. And then St. Elmo's fire runs around the inside. Green and red and blue balls of fire inside the cabin running around. I didn't even ask if that was supposed to happen. It's like nobody else is getting upset. It must be fine. From about 10,000 kilometers away, we fire the last engine. This thing's a glider from 10,000 miles away, and it lands. It's such a bad airplane. It lands at a 21-degree glide slope. When you land out here at the airport, it's a 3-degree glide slope. 7 times steeper and twice as fast as an airliner. No engines. You don't get to go around. And the kicker on this one is, most of the time, the person that is controlling that aircraft has never controlled it before. It's their first try. I'll tell you what, that gets your attention in the back seat. And if you miss, you die. So it has to be perfect. And not only that, you've been in space 10 days, so my head's spinning, and I'm thinking, I really hope this guy trained. It says something, actually, about the human nervous system and how we're able to train ourselves to do remarkably difficult tasks right for the first time if you can complete the training, if you can get to the point where you're really there. And you get down and people come up and congratulate you, great job, nice work, and your head's still in orbit, because as your friend is congratulating you, the tech will come over and bring you your change of clothes. It's like, oh, thanks, and then of course you leave them right there, and boom, they hit the ground. It's like, oh man. So they tell the spouse,
don't give him the baby.
Yeah, don't hand him the baby. Fortunately, they bounce, so. Yeah, so, I always thought that 40 years on the Earth, maybe I'd be having some issues adapting to space, but I was up at the window looking down. Oh, by the way, the first thing I'd studied photographs of the Earth for a year, preparing to be the photo TV guy on this flight, which is one of my jobs. But when I got up there, I couldn't recognize anything. Other people, oh, there's an Namibian desert. No. Till I saw the Great Barrier Reef. It's the first thing I recognized without having to look back at the computer and know where we were from space. So I'm looking to get there someday. Yeah, so I felt great in space, but when I came back, I thought, no problem. 40 days on Earth, 9 days in space, back to Earth. I was a basket case. I was a science fair project for my daughter. I couldn't even walk straight 3 days later. It took me a week until I was safe driving a car again. 3 days after landing, we're kind of, it's morning, and our 8-year-old son is cuddling with us, and I'm trying to pick him up and float him over to the other side of the bed, because I got to get up and go to the bathroom. He's like, Dad, what are you doing? I'm just trying, oh yeah, never mind. So it's remarkable how quickly you adapt to that environment. It's really interesting. And people ask me, were you scared to fly? And the fact is I wasn't scared to fly. I kind of confronted all that beforehand. And I hope that this happens to you someday. When I went to sit in the flight engineer seat, which is for my second flight, it's a pretty important spot. You have to really keep track of all the things that are going on. I had this sense of, what? For this brief moment, for this few days here, I am the best in the world at this job. If I mess this up, anybody would have messed it up. There is no one in the world. 6 weeks from now it's different. 6 weeks ago it's different. But today, I'm the best in the world at this job. And that sense of confidence that the training team brings you is an amazing feeling. And I hope that, do something to be the best in the world at it someday. It's wonderful. And people ask me, what's the best thing about space flight? I would have said on my first flight, it's looking out at the Earth. My second flight, I would have said it's flying like Superman with magic powers. But on my third flight, I really realized what the deal is. The deal is, it's the trust that you develop in your crewmates. The fact that you work together for a year, every day, flying jet aircraft at 700 kilometers an hour, 3 feet apart, knowing that that other person will not come back inside without you. That these people will sacrifice their lives to save you. To be able to work with that kind of people, to develop that kind of trust, and it's not just within the crew, it's within the organization. That was the best thing about spaceflight. So if you find a job where you can trust the people around you, keep that job. It's all about trust. So let's roll the last one. Bring it down a little bit. This is the view of the Earth from the International Space Station. And when you look at the Earth during the day, there's not a lot of evidence that people are here. The cities just look like little smudges. But at night, we light up this planet like a Christmas tree. And there's a little bit of natural thing going on there with the lightning. But the thing that strikes you about seeing the Earth from above the sky at night are the city lights. And you think about what that represents. That is the representation of intelligence in our entire galaxy. We don't know of any other planet that's lit up at night. Not even one light on any other planet in this whole galaxy, as far as we know. And we have lit this thing up like nobody's business. And what does that represent? That represents people working together, developing technology, trusting each other, sharing resources, creating this unnatural aspect of a planet of transforming an entire planet into something beautiful and new and different from anywhere else in the world. And this really makes me, this sort of view, well, also the aurora, but this sort of view gives me the optimism. I really feel like we as a people we can fix these problems. We can trust each other. We've made the world an amazing place, and we're going to just take it all over the galaxy someday, if we trust each other. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dan. That was very inspiring. Hopefully we can all see the Earth from space one day. We have a few minutes for some questions, so if you don't mind raising your hands and waiting for a roaming mic, then maybe standing up, stating your name and where you're from and your questions. But before that happens, I want to sneak in with my question first. So I know at 9:25 tomorrow you're flying to Auckland for Amplify New Zealand. I really need to know if you're flying Boeing or Airbus.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm actually flying on an Airbus A380, but you can bet I checked that out before. And I've looked at the weather, and yeah, so I don't actually pick one over the other, right? I'm perfectly happy to fly with whichever one's convenient, but it is I think it's just a really interesting, a plane that's made in the United States is all about the people who are flying it, and a plane that's made in Europe is all about the plane flying the people. So, and it's very hard to say which one's a better solution.
Great. Okay, so we have a question just down the back.
Hi, my name's Sham. I work at AMP. I was lucky enough to watch In the Shadow of the Moon, and I think it's one of the great films that I've seen. One of the things the astronauts talked about when they were planning to go to the moon was that they were able to train for everything except takeoff. And they said takeoff was one of those things that was really an incredible experience that they couldn't train for. Is that was something you experienced as well?
Yeah, I would say basically yes. You can train for the G-forces, but the actual sensation of the whole thing shaking and not so much the physical aspects of the launch, it's really it's the emotional aspects of the launch. Think about that. You've waited 40 years to do this thing, and it's finally actually happening. So they don't put a rookie in the commander seat because it's a little overwhelming. And the training team and the experienced astronaut corps understand exactly that sense of, holy cow, I mean, I'm really doing this. In fact, again, my wife would tell you that the families are listening to the communication as the launch progresses. And for my first launch, I was actually downstairs. I wasn't even on the flight deck. There's 2 levels to the shuttle. So I had no responsibilities at all for the first launch, which is a good place for a rookie to be. So my entire contribution to the communication protocol was after we were in orbit and the engines were shut down, one call over the comm which said, "Yeehaw, we're in space." So yeah, you rely on other people around you to sort of build that support so that you feel comfortable doing it. But it's an overwhelming experience. And I would say it's not just the aspect of spaceflight, it's having this dream you've worked so hard for come true.
So do I have a question just over there? Cam?
Yeah, hi, Cameron Fitter from AMP Capital. I think the narrative that's been running over the past 3 days is about innovation, it's about technology, it's about robotics, and you commented on a really interesting point about, you want to have the right driver in the driver's seat, and yet you put trust in those robotics and those tools being the crafts you're in. But then you conversely say, when you came down to land, that guys never had an opportunity to land before. So right. I think if we can relate that to business, should we be looking at building this sort of robotics or this artificial intelligence so we can break it at certain instances? And if so, how could you see that, or how do you see companies now rolling that forward?
Yeah, well, first of all, as I said, I think that the cooperation completely trumps competition in the sense of open source software versus walled garden software. And I also think that the kind of development of AI, actually I have a better example for a robot. When people are going to bring a robot into a factory, you do not want to take the cheapest robot you can find and give it the easiest job you can imagine. Because that easiest job is almost always a job that people are doing because they're not feeling well that day, or they've got hurt or something. So everybody else kind of lets them do that job that day. And if you take that away, you're going to find your robot broken more than it's not. And so what you really want is you want the robots to take the dirtiest, nastiest, terrible most job that nobody wants to do and introduce it that way. And that's true for paperwork too, right? I mean, if you have a regulatory change and you want to evaluate that, it's really nice if you can have a machine go through all the incredible details, present you with the report, and then you kind of see the overview, the big picture of that. The other thing I think that's important is that what jobs are going to be left, right? If they really get good at this, maybe we teach them too much and they take all the jobs. What they will never do is substitute for human-to-human interaction. And in the end, that's where the trust really comes from. People say, you trusted a machine with your life. That's not really quite true. Because we went around that first year of training and we met the people who built the shuttle. And you meet that person and you look them in the eye and you say, that weld has my life depending on it. And you recognize that those people understand that. So I didn't really trust a machine. I trust the people who built the machine. And the robots aren't going to be able to take that away.
So do we have any more questions from the floor?
Hi, Daniel Waller from Suncorp. Just a quick question. What part does fear play in terms of going to space? Especially your missions were kind of in between Columbia and Challenger. How does that play?
So I can honestly say I wasn't scared because you've worked at this so hard. You understand that it's not a safe thing to do. But by the time you are ready to go yourself, that just isn't an element in the equation. However, I will say that I was really scared to watch my friends go. And in fact, one of the jobs within the astronaut corps is family escort. It's a huge honor that a crew will ask you to be one of 2 astronauts to escort their families during the launch and the landing, in fact, for the whole mission. And so I'm standing there with the spouses and the children of the crew on the top of the Launch Control Center, and we're all together watching this thing go. And my knees are shaking. I mean, I am just praying this thing holds together, because it's just unimaginable to me if it doesn't, the consequences to these families. And of course, when you do that job, you realize that you put your own family through this sort of thing. So yeah, it's really not a personal fear thing at all. People say, yeah, you're just a tough guy. No, it's not the case. You're so committed to this thing, you've accepted the risk a long time ago, but the problematic side of it is you're asking your family to watch you take this risky thing, and that's hard to do.
Can you hear me? Yep. Greg Bird here from AMP. Just a really good way to end, where you said that we can travel the galaxy if we trust each other. And that's a great thing for humanity to think we can do anything. What are the things that you think that humanity needs to do now to trust more, to be able to achieve something amazing as that?
Yeah, well, we were talking last night about whether trust is learned or earned. And it's kind of both, right? And in fact, I can't tell you globally what we should do, but I can certainly tell you personally, kind of my perspective on it. In fact, Emily mentioned Survivor. Before I went on this, I don't know how many people know what Survivor is, but it's a TV show where people vote you off. And before I went on the show, they have an interview with a psychologist, and they evaluate you, and they actually are picking characters, is what they're doing. But in the last interview with this psychologist, she said, I hope you understand that you don't have a snowball's chance in hell of winning. And I was like, what do you mean? Well, of course I'm going to win. And she said, nope, you're not going to win. And she was right, of course. But I said, why am I not going to win? She said, because you've spent your whole life working with people you can trust. And I'm just going to tell you right now, you cannot trust these people. But as much as I tell you that, you are not going to be able to do it. You are going to get out there and you are going to trust them and they're going to stab you in the back. And as much as I tell you that, it's still going to happen. And it absolutely did. So, yeah, I think that part of it, at least, and my perspective on things like explaining an invention to someone. I have this idea, and here's an idea, and we're going to go build this together. Well, you can go one route and say all the forms and non-disclosure agreements and up-a-da-da-da. But my attitude has been, look, you know what? First of all, ideas are a dime a dozen. But mostly, I'm going to just give you this idea and trust you that we're going to work on it together. And if you betray that trust, well, I'll never give you another idea again. So I'm a big believer in assuming that I can trust someone. And that has paid off really well for me. Because there's a huge expense to being suspicious of someone. All of a sudden, lawyers get involved and forget about it. You're never going to get a deal. So, and I can say that it has never been the case that someone has ever stolen an idea. And I just give them away. So I think that when you extend trust to someone, in general, people will reciprocate that. And that's just a personal philosophy. It didn't work out too well in Survivor. But, you know, you go into that with your eyes open. Yeah, so I think the attitude of, I'm going to trust you until you tell me or prove to me that I shouldn't, has been a good one for me.
Well, thank you so much, Dan, for all those lessons on perseverance and trust. I'd now like to hand over to Reuben Young to wrap up. This is our last keynote of Amplify Sydney. So, Reuben.
All right.
Hi everyone, and thank you for indulging me for just 2 minutes. I know we're close to time. First of all, thanks to Dan for a fantastic presentation. A round of applause for Dan, please.